Hi, it is good to be back with you all again on video. And today our scripture is quite a story. Today we are reading from John, the 11th chapter, verses 1 through 43. So make yourself comfortable. This is kind of a long scripture. There was a certain man named Lazarus who was sick. He and his sisters, Martha and Mary, were from the village of Bethany. Mary was the one who had anointed the feet of Jesus with perfume and dried his feet with her hair. And it was her brother, Lazarus, who was sick. The sisters sent this message to Jesus: "Rabbi, the one you love is sick." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This sickness will not end in death. It is happening for God's glory, so that God's only begotten may be glorified because of it." Jesus loved these three very much. Yet even after hearing that Lazarus was sick, he remained where he was staying for 2 more days. Finally, he said to the disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." They protested, "Rabbi, it was only recently that they tried to stone you, and you want to go back there again?" And Jesus replied, "Aren't there 12 hours of daylight? And those who walk by day don't stumble because they see the world bathed in light. Those who go walking by night will stumble because there is no light in them." And after Jesus said this, he said to the disciples, "Our beloved Lazarus has fallen asleep. I am going to Judea to wake him." The disciples objected, "But Rabbi, if he's only asleep, he'll be fine." Jesus had been speaking about Lazarus' death, but they thought he was talking about actual sleep. And so he said very plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sakes, I am glad that I wasn't there, that you might come to believe. In any event, let us go to him." And then Thomas, the twin, said to the rest, "Let's go with Jesus so that we can die with him." And when Jesus arrived in Bethany, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. And since Bethany was only about 2 miles from Jerusalem, many people had come out to console Martha and Mary about their brother. And when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, while Mary stayed at home with the mourners. And when she got to Jesus, Martha said, "If you had been here, my brother would never have died. Yet even now I am sure that God will give you whatever you ask." "Your brother will rise again," Jesus assured her. And Martha replied, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection, and I am life. Those who believe in me will live even if they die, and those who are alive and believe in me will never die." "Do you believe this?" "Yes," Martha replied, "I have come to believe that you are the Messiah, God's only begotten, the one who is coming into the world." And when she had said this, Martha went back and called her sister Mary. "The teacher is here, asking for you," she whispered. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up and went to him. And Jesus hadn't gotten to the village yet. He was at the place where Martha had met him. And those who were there consoling her saw her get up quickly and followed Mary, thinking she was going to the tomb to mourn. When Mary got to Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "If you had been here, Lazarus never would have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the other mourners as well, he was troubled in spirit moved by the deepest emotions. "Where have you laid him?" Jesus asked. "Come and see," they said, and Jesus wept. The people in the crowd began to remark, "See how much he loved him." And others said, "He made the blind person see. Why couldn't he have done something to prevent Lazarus' death?" Jesus was again deeply moved, and they approached the tomb, which was a cave with a stone in front of it. "Take away the stone," he directed. And Martha said, "Oh, Rabbi, it has been 4 days now. By this time there will be a stench." And Jesus replied, "Didn't I assure you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took the stone away. And Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and said, "Abba, thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd, that they might believe that you sent me." And then Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus came out of the tomb, still bound hand and foot with linen strips, his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus told the crowd, "Untie him and let him go free." Many of those who had come to console Mary and Martha and saw what Jesus did put their faith in him. In this scripture, which I told you was a long one, well, there's a lot of things going on in here. A lot of things that I kind of speak to me about our current situation. And the first is that Jesus was moved and emotional about this. That when Jesus saw the suffering and the heartache of Mary and Martha and the others, when he saw that Lazarus was actually in a tomb, he was moved, and he wept. And which is good, because I know a lot of times these scriptures and the way that Jesus is depicted in popular culture and all, he's kind of like an automatron, like a android of sorts. Doesn't seem to have much emotions, and we get kind of unmoored and a little uncomfortable when Jesus has a strong emotion, like the turning over of the money changers' tables in the temple. He got angry, and rightly so, I think. And so this time he gets really moved. It's said twice. It very, very emphatically says that he wept and he was moved. And that, of course, speaks to me that even Jesus is having had strong emotions and strong reactions to everything going on around him at that time, but relied upon God's presence and God's attention to what was going on with God's people. And he says very clearly, I'm just saying this so that they will understand that I believe you are always hearing us. You are always hearing me. And you respond. And I think that's an incredible word of comfort, to know that God is always seeing us. No matter how grim or how desperate or how anxious we are, that God is with us, right along with us, seeing, paying attention to us, and caring for us. And then later in this, towards the end of the scripture, so the tomb, as you imagine, was very much like the one that Jesus was laid in after his crucifixion. And, it was like a cave and then a massive stone that they would roll up there. And so except for Jesus saying, "Come out, Lazarus," it took the community to free this man. It took more than one person to roll a stone away. And one of the Gospels, I can't remember which one, kind of leads us to believe that it took a couple of angels to do it. That first on Easter morning. But they have to roll the stone away. and the others have to be faithful to endure the stench. And frankly, our pain and our fear is sometimes incredibly overwhelming and not pretty. In our call today, we talked about our prayer call. We talked about giving ourselves permission to be messy, or a mess, not messy, but a big old mess. And some of us feel like it. And we, at times, throughout our grieving and throughout our fear and anxieties, are a hot mess. And this is Jesus is calling those folks, his community, Lazarus' community, to get up close and personal with the stench of his death, of the tragedy of what has happened to him. And they are the ones that unbind him. And we've talked about this before. On other times we've talked about this particular scripture, but they were bound up in cloths, kind of mummy-like, but their feet were all tied together with strips of cloth, and that so he couldn't move. He could maybe have gotten up on his own, stood up. That's about it. So it's the community that unbinds him, the community that participates along with God to heal us, to help us recover from whatever grief and deaths that we have encountered within our own lives, whether that's physical or metaphysically. So this is where we come in as community to each other and for each other. This is your scripture for today, and we'll be adding a couple of music pieces that Reese has done. And if you're thinking about the scriptures, because remember, next Sunday is Palm Sunday, we will, if you're thinking more about this one and you want to chat about it, I would love that. And you know how to get a hold of me. So, blessings, friends.